So the people we haven't seen, this is the
So as far as I
Thursday,
understand,
January
yesterday in our
14th,
we were at a
2021
meeting
Town
yesterday,
Board
and there was just a
Workshop. We
very
have
short
three
conversation about
topics
environmental.
on the dais tonight, so let's start right out. The leadership of the Parks and Rec Department is here tonight, Glenn Morrell and Chris Bilo, so let's have at the first topic.
Okay, so back in the fall, myself and Glenn started with the process of updating the IFP for the mowing services, which would start in '21.
Okay, and Chris, can you,
Oh, is that,
Just,
am I too far?
well, I don't know if
Here
they
with
can
the
hear
mask.
you.
Kind of muffled,
Yeah,
Is that better?
much.
I guess.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we started in the fall with the IFP for the mowing services. And we looked at doing so this year, when we did the IFP, we put it out for a 3-year contract. Bids were advertised back on November 11th. We accepted them up through, and the bid opening was on December 2nd. We had 3 bids that were received and opened at the 2nd. And again, all 3 bid for a 3-year contract. The bid prices that came in we had one that was actually about on par to where we were typically for the last few years from an expense standpoint. The other 2 came in lower. They both had their pluses and minuses, so really what it came down to was we had Garden Grove, Rochester Lawn Care, and Ted Hosmer Enterprises. The issue that we had with our low bid overall was they did not include the reference of commercial references that was required as part of the IFP. So they did not submit that, nor did the equipment that they submitted as their equipment that they'd be using for the contract, did we feel was going to be adequate, especially in situations where we got into wet springs, wet summers, where it could be a potential backup and then having to try to play catch up to try to do the space and the amount of acreage with just a couple zero-turn mowers really didn't suffice with our needs or our expectations of how the property should be kept. As an example, Rochester Lawn Care, who we're recommending, came in with 7 zero-turns along with 3 fairway mowers. So obviously their inventory or their fleet is much larger, can get things done in a more efficient and timely manner, which is obviously also part of this process. From a dollar and cent standpoint, Rochester Lawn Care came in the middle. Garden Grove, who is our current contractor, their per mow, which is new, again, that's a per mow price, which is something that we do have some control over. So if we get into a season where we don't need them to mow because of dry conditions, et cetera, we actually can save some money by eliminating that mow potentially for that week or for those weeks. Garden Grove came in just over 5,000 per mow, Rochester Lawn Care at 38, and Ted Hosmer at 28. There were some additional parts of the bid for extra mowing if we needed them to come back and do any type of extra mowing. That would generally be around our ball fields or any of our athletic fields that we may need to have an extra cut done for. For that, Garden Grove came in as the high, right around 1,900. Rochester Lawn Care came in as the low at 500, just about $600. And Ted Hosmer came in somewhere in the middle, just over 1,000. As I put together, and Glenn and I went over this again, looking at the equipment that was available in the service, the recommendation of taking Rochester Lawn Care in accepting their bid. And if you extrapolate that out over the course of a year in regards to similar numbers, actually that information that I provided on the sheet is off by a little bit. The actual savings to budget for what we have budgeted for '21 would be a savings of around $51,000, all things being equal.
That's a good number.
Good news.
Yeah.
Plus, we have more control over
We do.
one
So
cut,
again,
that
that's-
number
that's-
can easily go up.
That's factoring in if we have similar mow cuts, which I think was around 28 I think it was 28 cuts. So if
Right.
we have a season where we don't need them to mow through, a week or two in July or August, we have the potential to save, a few dollars there as well.
Well, we have the potential to save, but also the extra mowing cost is far less than the
Correct.
others. So
Yep.
that if it goes the other way,
Exactly.
Right.
we're not breaking the bank either.
Yep. The nice thing is we can limit the mowing on some of the larger areas and just have them mow just from an athletic standpoint. So it does give us a little bit of flexibility.
Can
I love this process.
Yeah.
It's great.
It seems like every other board meeting, we're coming here with these bids for things that are saving us $50,000, $60,000, $80,000. Kind of fun. And fun for the taxpayers, I should say. A couple questions. One, we're not voting tonight to accept the bid, or I didn't think so. So this was more presenting to the board just so, because really, and Paul, I know last year we did within bids, we have the best value verbiage now. And to some extent, and I'll also look at Attorney Genesi, this kind of falls into that best value potential aura. Because I think I'm interpreting this that the low bidder on the base mowing, you're suggesting obviously here why we're not, you're suggesting we go to that. And maybe a year ago, if we were here, that would have been problematic for us because we didn't have a best value component. But we do now. Charlie, am I interpreting this correctly?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, there's also the point of a lowest responsible bidder, and I think that's another sort of, I'll say subjective, if you will, but I think you
Absolutely.
can throw other things in. It isn't just a matter of price. You have to look
Right.
at other factors, and I think that's what Chris has done, so.
And as part of that, this IFP too, there was the awarding criteria, it was listed
Sure.
out amongst other thing price.
We required a reference list and they didn't supply it, so, right?
Yep.
Okay.
It sure makes a lot of sense to me, Bill. I mean,
Thanks for putting this together. Very
No,
well.
looks good, looks really good.
Great job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn.
Glenn did a lot of that legwork, so yeah. We actually did have one vendor too that did do a site visit that did not submit because they were upfront and said that their equipment wouldn't be capable to be able to keep up with it. So we did have one other site visit though, but they didn't submit.
Great.
Great.
All right.
Great
So
work, gentlemen.
I take it that we will be in a future regular board meeting doing a resolution to accept the bid.
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Chris and Glenn.
ASAP.
Yeah, I would think.
Start sooner than we think.
Should we start cutting the lawn in February, Barry?
You never know.
And we're switching up the order a little bit here because we do have several people here to present or support the 545 agenda item, the sewer plant presentation and asset renewal project. I think we can still get you started at 545 if you'll patronize me and let me shoehorn in. The other topic tonight was a discussion, and I can't stress this enough, a discussion on a referendum, a potential referendum in November of 2021 that would be on the ballot here for Webster citizens to consider extending the term of the town supervisor and also a term limit on the town supervisor. Now, in the packets that I gave to the board members tonight, I tried to just give a one-page, as I see it. There's two items I'd like to discuss, and Charlie, I'm going to hand the baton to you on the item one, which is the legal. And I hope you don't mind, I put a couple of the emails that you've sent me in the last few
No.
weeks.
No,
that
that's
reference-
fine. It was just, you would sought it out to me. I don't think you copied anybody else, so
No.
it's just between you and me. But that's fine. Obviously, I was giving you my legal, at least information.
Yes.
not so much an opinion, but as the emails show, there's basically two ways of getting the terms of office changed, getting it on the ballot. Both of them do require a referendum, which means a vote by the citizens of the town of Webster.
Right.
And one is under town law, and that's section 24A, and that would require a resolution passed by the town board 150 days prior to basically the general election. So you'd have to do it, I'd say, by the end of April, by the
Okay.
1st of May, say, and then it would be on the ballot. The other one can be done anytime, and that's under the municipal home rule law. That can be done with 60 days' notice or more, and that can be done anytime during the year, or it can be done at the general election. That's up to the town board how you want to do it. Again, I had made a suggestion that, in terms of the mechanics of it, by how you wanted to conduct it, it could be done at the general election, which might be easier, or you could have it done, a referendum where you have one or two sites and have the people vote at a time other than the general election. So you could do that with 60 days' notice. Either way, it's done by, the town law section is done by resolution. Well, they're both done by resolution, effectively. The other one is done by local law, and one's done by resolution only. The other one's done by standard local law. You'd pass a local law, and then
Right.
then it would go to the town. Now, in terms of term limits, generally speaking, that can be done by just a change in our town code. That can be done by local law. It does not require a referendum.
That's interesting. I mean, that's interesting to me.
Well, I was surprised too. I
I-
looked it up, and there are a few municipalities that have term limits, and there's nothing that requires, other than, the standard procedure of changing your code. You'd have to go through the local law process or the ordinance process, still have to get the blessing of the state. It does not require a referendum.
Well, the beauty of this being a quick, just kind of shot across the bow to get the board thinking about this, is that we're not doing anything tonight, but you have some options now from a legal perspective. The second item, the proposal I'm putting out here, and a draft is a draft, is that if it got on the ballot in November of '21, which, Charlie, to be honest with you, I think the more people that vote, the more commensurate is what the will of the people is than if we did some special vote that only 2,000 people show up at. If people are for this, you'd know it it's a law of statistics. You're going to get the most people as your November
Well,
election.
one of the things, if you look at what I said in the second email, or actually it was the first email, I talked about municipal law, home rule law, which would be by a local law. You'd pass that and have the referendum set. Under that, as opposed to the other one, it would actually be effective at that election. Therefore, if you did it under municipal home rule law, and you had the referendum done this coming November, the person elected, for example, at that time could be in office for 4 years. You would not have to wait till another election. If you did it under Town Law 24, then you would have to wait until the next election for the 4-year term to kick in. So if you want the 4-year term to kick in now, you do it under municipal home rule law. If you want it to kick in later, you do it under Town Law 24A.
Wow. That's a second revelation tonight. The one about the non-referendum for the term limit
Yeah.
and the differentiation between 24A and home rule. I will say this, off the top of my head, and I know I'm in a precarious position because I am the sitting supervisor, I would not want a referendum vote in 2021 that all of a sudden, if I'm on the ballot, would make my term 4 years. I think that's self-serving. That's not what I'm looking for. This is more of a long-term for the town. It's got to have discussion. This is not, there's a lot of different meat on the bone of this that would have to be discussed before we went forward with this. And even at the end of the day, if the board decided to go forward with it, the citizens vote on whether they want it or not. So, it's funny, a year ago, and I've made it very clear that since I've been in this position, my learning curve at first was like a cliff. It might be a black diamond ski hill now. So a little less. But every day I'm still learning things. So when I looked at this a year ago, before I got in the position, to me it made a lot of sense to have the supervisor term at 4 years and a 2-term limit. I've talked to a lot of people and gotten counsel from a lot of people, including many people in this room, who said if you ever do go down that path, you really, in this position, would want to have it be 3 terms, to be 12 years. And now that I've been in the position for a year, I see why that would make more sense from at least a structure standpoint than a 2-term. But there's just so many variables to this, and we're at the 5:45 range, where I said that we're going to do 10 minutes just to get it out there. Workshops are great. It's a discussion. There's no decisions made tonight. And I think in the future, when we bring it back, maybe we'll get a little bit more deep dive discussion on some of the variables of why or why not you would want to go forward with something like this on a referendum. The simplest thing to do is nothing. I understand that. I just don't know if doing nothing is the best long-term plan for the town into the future. So, unless any of the board members have any other comments, questions at this time,
I just think further discussion is definitely warranted. We should put it on the agenda for the next workshop and continue to talk about it. I think it has merit, in my opinion.
whether it's the next workshop, I think what Charlie just showed today is that there will come a point where the clock strikes midnight, where 150 days, whatever, that we run out of time. I don't
Right,
know
if you're gonna do it under the town law, which is the one where it would not take effect at this election, that has to be done. You have to pass the resolution 150 days prior to the general election.
5 months. before.
5 months,
About
so-
June.
Yeah,
All
you're
right.
right. I said May. I made a mistake.
something, but
Yeah.
close enough. I
It's
mean,
June, no, you're right, you're right. It'd be
Right.
the end of May, by
All
the
right.
end of May, yeah.
Well, the devil's in the details. This was the first shot. Now I'm 2 minutes over. I told you guys I'd be done at 5:45. Thank you. Ken, you came in from Syracuse. So unless anybody has anything else, are we done with this discussion? And Charlie, you never cease to amaze me. 2 revelations from that discussion. And I bet you 2 revelations that maybe the rest of the town board did not know on those things. So now, what is it, like the warm-up acts and now the star attraction tonight. And Art Patron, am I right in assuming that it was the workshop of December 15th, where you say you get a big, great presentation with Rick Canali, our 4A operator, and we decided we'll come back on January 14th, sharpen your pencil, do a presentation of what a study would cost on this sludge dryer and all that stuff. Is that about how it went down?
That's about how it went down. Rick and I, about a month ago, came in and did our dog and pony show, giving the state of the plant, the technologies we saw, what we saw as savings we could produce, revenue we could generate, and also talked about, landfill closings and things like that. Obviously, the town board saw value in what we presented and allowed us to reach out to Barton LaJudas to look at the next step as to cost of doing a study and evaluation and moving a little bit further. So with that, I give you Ken Knutson, Senior Vice President of Barton LaJudas, and I will let you introduce your team.
I will do that. So we do have 4 of us here tonight. I don't know if we should be standing somewhere to be on camera or how this thing's working.
She's got you all over the place.
But you all know Leeson. She's working on the plant project now and the pump station projects. You know, Pete and I, we've been in front of the board many times and working on the plant and the pump stations. And this is George Bevington. He too is a 4A operator. He's on our digester triage team. And he's a former client of ours that he's going to speak to some of his experience with some of the larger plants and solids handling and whatnot. So we do have a tough act to follow, but you're going to see a lot of good material in here that's already been presented to you. This is another opportunity for discussion that could save you money. So I think it's pretty appropriate to follow what was just covered here with Parks. But it does kind of put you in a different mindset here that we're going to have to change the name from your treatment plant from a water pollution control facility, or a WPCF, to a WRRF, which is a water resource recovery facility. And that's not really a new term. It's actually been around for quite some time in some publications that were developed, I think, back in maybe around 2009 or so, 2010. And what that is basically in this time of beneficial reuse and green energy and carbon footprint reduction, as we've talked about your current project, there's many funding programs out there, a lot of which are focused on just that. So this way of looking at your treatment facility changes from, okay, you got all this stuff and you got to put all this power into it and treat it to get to clean water. Now it's basically looking at, well, you've got the stuff coming in, but there's a lot of things in there that we can actually extract and reuse and save money in doing that. So with that, the three of us, myself, Pete, and George, are going to run through some of these.
Ken, I don't mean to cut you off, but the new world of COVID with these workshops, they're now televised. And I know that Karen's got the screen up, but I don't know without you with a microphone if people at home can, I can hear your voice fine.
Just fine.
You can hear it?
Yeah. He's got
Okay.
a microphone on. He's good.
Oh, we've gotten high tech, haven't we, Ken?
I'm wired up.
Never mind.
No problem. Yeah, at any time, sure. If anyone has any questions on this is open discussion,
Okay.
so feel free to interrupt us. So, fairly quick agenda tonight, talking about your asset renewal needs, that being, what equipment needs to be upgraded following your clarifier replacement here. What are some of the optimization opportunities, both on the process side and more in particular your energy use side? What do we bring to the table? Why is B&L being considered for this? That's kind of going to be between George and I presenting our experience. And then we are a FlexTech, NYSERDA FlexTech appointed term contractor. So I'm going to get into that, and it's through NYSERDA that we'd like to prepare a study here that takes a deeper dive into your energy use and optimization of your process, basically to save money. That said, we're going to run through a general scope of service. It's pretty similar to a PR, but like I said, it's going to take a deeper dive into your solids handling process and energy use and stuff like that. And then the schedule, which is pretty aggressive, acknowledging that you're on the heels of this project, this phase one being wrapped up, funding programs starting to come out. We want to hit the ground running. You got to move shovel ready. So we're going to go through that as well.
And I'm George Bevington. I've been with B&L on both sides of the aisle. They were a client of mine back in a previous life. In the last several years, I've been back on a daily basis. I was kind of lucky because Art brought me in a year and a half or so ago to do a little bit of technical assistance, and I got to work with your staff on some biogas issues, digester issues. So we've gotten to know your folks, and that's really important because the last thing you want is the engineers to come up with a great solution and not have the staff that really has the buy-in. So this is the day I was out there doing some technical assistance, and I was pretty impressed with maintenance and operations staff. We solved a few problems.
I'm going to provide a real brief overview. Obviously, as Ken mentioned, Ken and myself have been in front of the board several times regarding the work that's ongoing, the original study. Essentially, this is, and I think Art mentioned this to me beforehand, this is hopefully the last time we use the term Phase 2, WWTP. We're really looking at kind of that rebranding of the WRRF. But an overview of the studies we've previously done, we did the original PER, we came back and did a revised PR to look at that regional alternative. We also took a harder look at the solids processing facilities. Right now, we're in the Phase 1 project. The biggest need back in 2016 was the secondary clarifiers. That project is wrapping up. The third clarifier is probably going to be, the 2 clarifiers are currently operating, third clarifier will be starting up probably the next month. Along with that, there's a new backup generator. That generator is complete. We're working out some of the startup issues, but basically that generator is currently operating on that end. That the concept of Phase 2 really was that the PER presented the overall plan upgrades. The current Phase 1 project was driven out of necessity, what the really immediate failed infrastructure was. So it includes some of the other supporting components, effluent disinfection, an upgrade to the biological treatment process, additional solids handling, meaning the primary clarifier and the additional grit removal process, upgrading on the solids handling systems, and then overall just energy efficiency. When we talk about energy efficiency, a lot of it's driven, aeration drives a lot of this. There's certainly the plant is operating it operates somewhat blind. There's a lot of new technologies and new innovations regarding how to make a biological system more energy efficient. Sorry, I got to talk and drive here. So the two mentioned real quick on the with respect to the asset renewal and the opportunities for the aeration process. These are the aeration tanks. These are kind of sketched as what the current concept would be. Currently, the tanks operate in there's 3 basins, and ultimately, yeah, unfortunately, I can't point to this. So one of the challenges at the, let me go back. One of the challenges with the facility is simply footprint. There's not a lot of area to develop. So the process we have is really focused on kind of providing a more more conservation of space. It's called a fixed film process. The specific process we looked at was an integrated fixed film activated sludge process. So essentially take the same tank, we reconfigure the plumbing, and we add media in there. Essentially increase the surface area to actually enhance the biological efficiency of the process. Along with that, the biological process runs on blowers. Those blowers are pushing air through a lot of diffusers in the bottom of this. They currently run, I think they run continuously right now. So a modern facility they will monitor oxygen levels, and they will ramp the speed of the blowers up and down, and new blowers will come on. So there's additional controls that in and of themselves will provide some significant increase in some significant enhancements to energy efficiency. Second part of this, the crux of this, and I think this is really what's driving a lot of these discussions, is on the solids handling. If we looked at we did the Phase 1 project with that need of, you had clarifiers that had failed. The town was really limping along with about 1.5 clarifiers. And since Art's been involved, and certainly since Rick's been involved, there's been an identified need, and that was reflected in the original PER, that the solids handling facilities are deficient. Our findings indicated that right now there's not enough capacity just to digest the solids, but there's safety issues. There's issues with the digester covers, so there's a lot of methane being currently leaked to the atmosphere. The gas flare that's required to kind of control that gas, that's not currently code compliant. It sits on top of the building. So there's a lot of issues with respect to code compliance, safety, and overall efficiency of the system. So the other piece of this is that the digestion process itself, by not being as efficient, that ends up you're generating more solids than you need to. The end result of that is there's more tonnage leaving the site. There's a tipping fee issue with that. So with that, obviously, the reduction of a more efficient digestion process or solids management process ultimately leads to a reduced volume, reduced percent solids, reduced tonnage that requires landfilling. I mentioned the environmental safety benefits. So part of the focus, and this is where George comes in with respect to some of the new technologies that are out there. There's a lot of things happening. The market's kind of driving a lot of these needs right now. Landfilling, as the tipping fees are significantly increased, and Art can attest to this. I think the $65 per ton, we probably plugged that number in our original study. We're currently at over, those fees have doubled. And coupled with that, there's locally, there's 3 landfills that have a potential. One of the landfills is closed in 2028, one's closed in 2025, and there's 4 landfills. The 2 Monroe County landfills will currently not accept town of Webster sludge. And I think at that, I'm gonna turn over the conclusions to.
Yeah,
Ken,
so
so.
to summarize what you've already heard from Art and Rick, as well as what Pete has kind of run through here, there's several reasons why this project needs to be done and can benefits to the town. Again, the most pressing being you've got very old equipment that needs to be revamped, replaced with modern equipment to make it more energy efficient, code compliant. And of course, your ultimate goal here is increase and improve your operator safety. Aeration, if that's not addressed, then you start to run into speedies compliance issues. Of course, meeting speedies permit limits, that's the job of your operators. That's a must, as you know. You want to avoid that. Tipping fees, as Pete just reviewed. And then with a facility like this, as George and I are going to discuss a little bit on some examples, you've got the opportunity to turn this, potentially put in facilities that could provide revenue in the form of a merchant facility, that being in the form of septic and leachate, which you've done in the past, but however, some of your recent equipment deficiencies have stopped that. Energy and process optimization, again, not only good for your bottom line each year, but there's also grants that can be leveraged through looking at that. We are going to revisit the design flows and loads. I think the last ones we had were probably 2017. We typically look at 3 years worth with the new clarifiers in place, new operator on board. We want to look at the best data, and again, we're going to look at a 20-year planning period here for the town service area and make sure that there's capacity for growth. So we're just basically revisiting and updating the numbers that we did in the prior PR. And as I said at the beginning, ultimate goal here is to put in some improvements here and basically convert this into a water resource recovery facility. So I've been with the firm for 30 years, and in that time have done several plant upgrades. These plants have ranged anywhere from 10,000 gallons a day to 5 to 8 million gallons a day, and George, of course, has some experience with much larger plants as it relates to their solids handling. So here's a few examples, some of which are within New York State, and then there are some that are outside of New York State. And a couple of these we would consider true conversions to water resource recovery facilities. So the first one that's very similar in size to Webster's would be up in the village of Malone, which of course is way up north. This was recently completed last year, and it included improvements across the board, from septic receiving to headworks to primary clarifiers area. Well, in this case, they had RBCs. Excuse me?
Could you speak up a little bit, please?
Sure. Yeah, let me come out here, maybe where you can see me. So again, improvements across the board, both in the headworks facilities, a lot of similar improvements to not only what's been completed at your plant, but also what we envision being completed. But in the solids handling in particular, very similar setup, wherein they have 2 anaerobic digesters. All of the older gas equipment and pumps were in the central building here, in the sludge heaters, and then the covers as well were old. So we came in and we reconfigured this, basically upgraded these digesters, did structural improvements, cleaned them out because any tanks like this probably haven't been cleaned in some time. We put new covers on them, did all new gas handling, brand new premium efficiency boiler and sludge heaters, revamped their sludge press, and this over here was actually a brand new tank that is a secondary digester. You use your primaries to heat the sludge and break the sludge down. That then makes its way into the secondary digester, which is ambient temperature, that's where all your gas builds up. And this bubble right here was actually it's a gas holder that's on top. So instead of a floating cover, this is some of the latest technology that's being used to store your gas. In addition to that, they had a non-compliant flare, which has to be, 100 feet from any building, I believe. So we put a new flare in for Malone as well. Another
Ken,
example
can I-
up in the North Country.
Ken, can I ask one question? 'Cause
Sure.
Malone is 3.3 MGD average and an 8 MGD peak. Is Webster 5 MDG? And a 7.5 peak?
Town flow, yeah, 7.
No,
No?
go ahead, Rick.
No, permit is 7.5, but 2.5 is village. We're designed for 5 million, but we have about 3.
Speak up, I couldn't hear that.
Sorry, our permit is 7.5 million, but 2.5 is the village.
Right,
Our treatment capacity is 5,
5.
average about 3 right now.
We're averaging about 3?
Yeah.
So that is close to Malone. That is,
Right.
okay.
And then, keep in mind, when we size those secondary clarifiers, we have to look at 20-year growth, peak flow rate. Those can handle 12, 16 million?
Yeah, I think it's the peak.
16 MGD.
Instantaneous flow coming in, so with Webster, the good news of Webster, there's a pretty decent, I think we were at almost like 0.75% per year of growth, so I think 20 years, we were about 15-16% higher on that, so look forward is quite a bit more than, we see in a lot of other municipalities, so that's kind of been what's been happening in Webster, obviously, for the past several decades.
Couple things too, you see a belt filter press here. Currently, you have a centrifuge and an older press. You're going to see some different technologies here. Again, these are things that we would look at alternatives similar to a PER. And then also with septage receiving. You can run the gamut on just dumping into a manhole with a screen, or in this case, we put in, the card actuated dumping where you can keep track and every hauler gets a card and so on. It bills them that way. So again, in the village of Potsdam, 2 anaerobic digesters, very similar configuration again to what you have here in the town. And we came in and basically revamped all of the gas handling and safety equipment, the covers, the pumps, sludge heating, sludge mixing is critical for efficiency in maintaining temperature in your anaerobic digesters.
Ken, what is that bottom picture? What are we looking at?
This here?
Yep.
So again, you take these covers off. Typically, you're going to have a concrete structure that needs refurbishing, and everything's got to be clean. And once you do that, what we did here is we came in and put in this piping system with these valves that are directional, and this basically takes liquid sludge and pumps it into the digester, and in different directions gets a nice optimal mix going in at full depth in the digester. Right now, what's your mixing system consist of?
Theory?
When it was built,
Right now, bubble, or cannon, sorry.
Cannon, the bubble gunner, yeah. This is one of the typical ones that we use, versus another opportunity is a roof-mounted mixer, which George can cover. And then in this case, that's a screw press, which is some recent technology that we've been using at some of the smaller plants.
So the 6 examples that we're throwing to you, Ken has gone over the first 2 because he's been more involved in those, but I've actually had involvement on both of those facilities as well in concept and a lot of the startup issues that happens at all these facilities. So I've been to both, but I really cut my teeth in the anaerobic digestion world by managing the Gloversville-Johnstown wastewater plant for over 15 years. So about 3 hours to the east of you. When you talk about the term WRF, Gloversville-Johnstown tried to become one of the first WRFs in New York State. And everybody can get to that term everybody doesn't have to do it the same way. For Gloversville, it was about expanding anaerobic digestion capacity because of industry in the area. A lot of dairy waste is there because of the Fayet and Euphrates Cheese Company, and that waste is converted in the anaerobic digestion. The middle picture is power generation, and Gloversville-Johnstown generates all of the power at their wastewater plant from converting the organic waste to biogas, plus they actually export excess power. So that became one of the first facilities designed by B&L to export power in New York State. To the left, it's the gas holder, some technology that's going to be very similar technology for Webster. The bottom line is the work at Gloversville Johnstown was very nice. It's a nice term, but Gloversville Johnstown tried to say we had declining population, we had to change our business formula in taking advantage of the anaerobic digesters, help stabilize sewer rates. So instead of sewer rates raising, they use the resources of reclaiming energy to help in their bottom line. So that was the main drivers for that facility. There's someone in this room who spent a lot of time at Rome. He's your current operator. He embarked on a project to take old digester technology that was in disrepair, and a project we are in construction right now on is taking a digester. The bottom left picture is a 70-year-old anaerobic digester that was in very bad shape. The good news is the concrete was good. It needed covers, it needed a mixing system. That's the pumped mixing system like Ken was showing you from Malone, from Potsdam, being installed, a similar one. That technology is being used on one of their digesters. They're going with some other technology called linear motion mixer, some of the new cutting edge stuff that's out there for one of their other digesters. So existing tanks being reconstructed as part of this project. They have screening equipment to screen waste, organic waste, to get debris out of it before the waste goes into the digester. And that building up there is so they can accept some tankers. As trucks bring the organic waste, it can be screened prior to going to the digesters. So this project it's been a lot about creating additional revenue, but also improving the only part of the plant that wasn't improved, and that was the solids handling systems and the anaerobic digesters. Town of Niskayuna is a project, a $30 million project that was a rebuild of the plant, but there was 25% of it is a project that involved the solids handling. Bottom right, it's a belt press. Their belt press was falling apart. It was rotted away. So this is a new stainless or new galvanized belt press being installed. The middle bottom picture is a new cover going on their existing digesters. Digester covers are not in good shape at the Webster facility. They're actually in very poor shape. Those would be removed as part of this project, and possibly a cover similar to what you're seeing could be installed. They had some tanks that had the gas storage on top, similar to what Ken was talking about earlier. This is a 3.5 MGD facility, so there's some similarities in size. For them, the driver here was getting old infrastructure updated and actually using that biogas for a variety of things. Heating the digesters, doing sludge drying, and in their case, they have a generator to generate some power. Yes, sir.
I noticed in a lot of your presentation, I see belt presses. Webster changed to a centrifuge about 15, 16 years ago.
Yes.
And used the belt press as a backup in
Correct.
case of breakdown. Is belt press the way to go now?
No, it could be. Their centrifuge is a wonderful tool. Belt press is a wonderful tool. You have those choices. The facility I ran made a conscious effort to stay belt press because the maintenance staff could maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
They felt comfortable with it. They had been maintaining the bearings and belts. What belt presses are great is they run very, very slow RPMs. The bearings turn very slowly, so they tend to have less maintenance on them. And most people who have socket wrenches and torches can put a new bearing on or put a new belt on. The centrifuges, from when I was running a centrifuge in Rochester Northwest Quadrant plant back in the 70s, was rare. They were kind of original centrifuges, relatively slow. These new ones are extremely fast RPMs, and I'm sure Art would agree, it's not something that can be done, maintained easily by our standard maintenance staff. It needs specialty people. So it depends what's important to you. Secondly, the centrifuge actually produces a very good cake product, but it's using a lot more energy to do that. So if kilowatts are important to you, because let's just say you're spending 15 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe the belt press would be better. So it depends on your situation. Tipping fees, electricity costs, all those things go into it. So I think you have an option. Obviously, you know both technologies. Either can work. It's really a local decision.
Okay, thank you. No, you're fine. So we move on to a much larger project. And it's interesting. This is Altoona, Pennsylvania. This is under construction right now. The picture on the left, there's some brand new digesters being built. This is a community that never had an anaerobic digester. They're getting into the anaerobic digestion business because they want to make a solids product that eventually becomes for beneficial use and gets back onto the crop land. So to do that, they wanted to stabilize their sludges through anaerobic digestion, and then they want to put those sludges through a sludge dryer. Because in Pennsylvania, similar to some of the problems we're having here locally, there's getting bans on how much sludges and cakes can go to the local landfill. What used to be a rule in Pennsylvania was if you were a landfill operator, 10% of what comes across the scale could be sludges and cakes from Art bringing it to them. Because of some operational problems at landfills in Pennsylvania, they've changed the rule to 5%, and now everybody's scrambling. Where do you go? And fees have risen. So in that case, that's why they're getting into the sludge drying business. Just was on the calls today at this facility in Pennsylvania. The B&L designed sludge dryer is going to be delivered in October. So what's interesting here is this project's a lot of money, a lot of work being done, but I will not use the power generation that Gloversville Johnstown does, will not be happening here. They're going to take all that biogas and they're going to put it all into their sludge dryer. Instead of buying natural gas, they want to use biogas to do the cake drying. When you're all done, that cake, instead of having 80% water in it, or 75% water, depending how good you do, it's going to have 5% water, 95% solids, so only a few truckloads are going out either for disposal or for beneficial use to a farm.
So that kind of runs the gamut, and what you see there in the discussion on the presses for the sludge. Minimally, we're going to look at 3 different types of presses, which are going to be kind of driven again by what the preference is and the staffing capabilities are. So with this, I'm sure you don't want to hear you got to do another study, but you have to do another study. But it's going to take a different look at this, and it's got a different spin on it. And as I mentioned, as a NYSERDA FlexTech consultant, we have the ability to bring these projects to NYSERDA, wherein they will fund a portion of the study cost, which I'll get into. But we became a FlexTech consultant based on our qualifications, and minimally we need to bring three projects a year, I believe. And it starts as a planning grant, and ultimately what you're doing is developing a PER with a capital improvement plan that could ultimately leverage implementation money through NYSERDA as well. As I said, it's consistent with what's been done already with the EFC, DEC compliant PER. So we're going to leverage as much of that as we can, especially on the process evaluation side. But again, we're going to take a deeper dive into the alternatives, power use, life cycle costs, and compare all those to come up with an ultimate recommendation based on your preferences on equipment. And then, let's see, so yeah, that pretty much covers that. So this is our estimation of the grant that can be gotten through FlexTech. So we were provided with the website that includes the town's power bills, which is both, in this case, natural gas and electric. So we went through that and took a look at that for the plant site in its entirety. And it looked like for 2018, 2019, you're about $115,000 a year in electric costs, and we're just under $30,000 for gas, totaling about $144,000 a year. So currently, NYSERDA's FlexTech grant is it's roughly 10% or up to 10% of your annual power costs, including gas and electric, or no more than 50% of the study cost. So in this case, 10% of the 14 is roughly about a $14,000 and change NYSERDA grant that can be applied towards the study. So as a FlexTech firm, like I said, we bring projects to NYSERDA. Should the town move forward with this, we would provide a scope and a contract for town board execution. We would have a separate scope and contract, which you don't see, which we go to NYSERDA with the same scope, and they pay the balance. So right now, as I mentioned, it's a 10% reimbursement. It may increase up to 20%. And then these
Ken, what would make it increase to 20%?
I think just a change in the funding opportunity in the pond, they call it.
NYSERDA is trying to encourage more of this to happen, so they're trying to jumpstart more of these work-type projects, these energy efficiency, and NYSERDA, as time to time, will allow a higher percentage. So instead of potentially $14,000, there's some upside potential. I think we're just being conservative for now, saying the 10% is pretty much a guarantee, but there's some potential upside there.
Okay.
So the scope of service, again, a lot of similarities to the PER. Ultimately, what we do want to do here is build a separate standalone engineering report that speaks to the WRRF opportunities. So within our scope, which we've provided a draft to Art and Rick for review, we envision doing minimally 3 workshops, both with town representatives, and as you did with the clarifiers, strongly encourage getting the DEC at the table early on in the project, make them a project partner, make them aware of it, and if it is in fact funded through a NYSERDA FlexTech grant, we would have FlexTech representatives at those meetings as well. As I mentioned, we're going to update the 20-year flow and load projections over what we had done in the prior PER with more recent data. And then a deeper dive, as I said, into the unit processes that haven't been addressed to date, that pretty much being your secondary clarifiers and the solids handling pumps. But that would include headworks, so looking at enhanced screening as well as grit removal. You already have one grit removal system there. We may look at putting a second one in. The biological nutrient removal, your aeration system, you've got some more stringent nutrient loads specified, or nutrient limits rather, specified in your species permit. There's some different alternatives we'll look at aeration, again, in increasing the level of instrumentation and control, and the links to your SCADA system, which is there right now. The 3 Ds of biosolids. So George we talked about digestion, dewatering, and disposal. Again, there's immediate cost savings depending on your percent water, or your percent solids and where that goes. We will look at various alternatives under that, including various technologies, including sludge dryer, belt press, centrifuge, and so on, whatever we identify with the operators in workshop number 1. And then the opportunities here for potentially operating as a merchant facility, again, reinstating your ability to accept septage and leachate, and putting in facilities to accept those, different levels of dumping stations and tracking and stuff, whatnot. All this, again, linking into your SCADA system and automated control to optimize energy use. And then one thing we also will add to this is looking at these older buildings, which probably today don't meet energy code, but preparing models of each of the buildings, in particular the administration building, modeling the space, the roofs, the windows, the doors. That's a common item under the NYSERDA Flex Deck. And then ultimately, again, capital costs, annual operation maintenance costs, short-lived asset costs. We'll provide that analysis for each of the alternatives and ultimately make a recommendation. And then, as we did with Phase 1, identify a plan of finance, with Paul's assistance to identify what the impacts may be to your users and what types of grants you may need to offset capital costs. That will all be done in a draft report for your review before it goes final. So based on the scope that we presented to Art and Rick, we're at a $42,000 study cost, less than anticipated NYSERDA grant. So the fee to the town would be $27,600 for...
Unless we get 20%.
Correct.
We can only hope.
And then, was there something about 20%, but not to max out at more than 50% of the project cost? So would we be capped at 21,000 in that schematic from NYSERDA?
Yeah.
Cost us 27,000.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want us getting all excited about shooting for 28,000 in grant when I thought I heard that there was a either or. 20%, but no more than 50.
They're usually, the 20% can happen, and yes, the 50% rule usually happens too. So if that's the case, I guess the maximum, if we hit it,
No more
would be
than
the
21.
21.
Okay. But I'm with you, Barry. I like the 20%, but I want us to have realistic expectations.
Well, realistically, I'm thinking 14.4.
You're a wise man.
So, as always, Art has laid down a pretty aggressive scope here, or schedule rather, to go with this scope.
If he's not one thing,
However,
he's consistent.
Considering our knowledge of the plant and the work that's been done to date with your staff and the board as well, I think we can stick to the schedule. So, tonight we're here presenting our proposed scope. Like I said, there is a detailed scope that would be attached to a contract. Once it's cleared, these gentlemen, it would make its way to the board for your consideration, and if authorized, we would start immediately here in February. Have the draft report to the town through Rick and Art by May, and the final report to the agencies by July. And again, we're starting to see some funding programs coming out. We want to get this out as quick as possible, and basically, get this into EFC to have a project listed in the CWSRF this year, 2021. So that's the driver there, and that's typically August, which we would definitely plan to meet. And then once that's approved, move to final design by amendment to this contract. That being completed from August of this year through January of next year, out to bid in a favorable bidding market, and awarded by March of 2022, and start construction a year and 3 months from now. Absolutely.
Okay.
Head is spinning.
Pardon, Ben?
My head is spinning.
Well, you know what, Ken, if you wouldn't mind, and if the board doesn't mind, I know the next page is Q&A, yep. So, can I do a little dissection, per se, of that timeline that Mr. Petrone has put out there? The first item in January of '21, there's 3 things there, I think. The complete scoping, is that done?
Yes.
Is the proposal presentation what we're doing right now?
Yes.
would the board authorization be what you'd consider a resolution that the board has said that we're gonna appropriate or whatever the funds for, spending up to 27,600 or whatever on something like this? Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So now you're into February. Did we just effectively, as a town board, hand the baton back to you?
Yeah.
Somewhere February, March, April, May, so in a 3 to 4 month period, you commence evaluation, and you present a draft report to the town in May. Okay. Now, that report comes in, is the next things in July, is that predicated on the fact that the report comes in, which is essentially a PER, and in somewhere between May and July, are you assuming that the town board does a resolution to proceed with this?
Well, I think you would accept the final recommendations within the PR, Tom.
Okay.
Not necessarily proceed with it, and then also you basically authorize submission of this thing to EFC to get it listed in the intended use plan.
Okay, so if you're going to EFC, and I assume, for the most part in July, and I don't want to convolute this, you're going for a 25% grant on whatever the estimated PER cost of this is, or the cost that the board.
Okay, so the SRF program, again, is the subsidized interest rate loan program that typically is going to be your base financing.
Right.
Now, the assumption would be that we develop a project here that scores high enough that gets you basically above a subsidy line. EFC funds projects down to a certain score. In the following year, those below that don't qualify for subsidized interest rate and go to market rate, which is where we were with phase one, and we determined that the town was better off going conventional bonding versus going through SRF guaranteed financing. The grant you're talking about, which is the $3 million grant you got for phase one, is
Yes.
the WIA grant. That program has not been released yet this year. We
Okay.
don't know when it's going to come about. Certainly, that would be one program we would go after. Another one which just came out this year is the Green Innovations Grant Program, the GIGP, which in recent years has only funded stormwater and water quality. They've now expanded that to include energy efficiency at wastewater treatment plants. So that may come out, or will come out again. And then NYSERDA implementation grant. So the plan is, once we have that PER to EFC, then that allows you to do your bond resolutions, basically move yourself to shovel ready to position yourself for WIA and any other programs that may come out, and that plays into your plan of finance.
I think I understand that. Does all the board members understand that?
I think I do.
Okay. So what, in essence, that August milestone of the final per IUP submission deadline, is that more on you, or is that on the town?
Us.
Okay.
Us providing you with a report that you're comfortable with and will basically support moving forward.
So the submission, the draft report is going to be, it's going to have all the main things in it. It's going to be a little rough because it's a draft. If staff and the board is feeling comfortable and gives some input, then between that draft time period in August, it's finalized so that report can be a signed, sealed, and delivered report and delivered to the state with your, of course, the plan of action. And maybe that plan of action is a sludge dryer. Maybe that plan of action is fixing 2 covers on a digester and doing a third digester. Whatever that is, because I think what the direction from staff is let's go in with we're hitting a restart button here. Let's throw everything on the table that Ken's talking about and identify what that project is. And I think your staff obviously is a very diligent staff and will be looking over our shoulder. And secondly, they'd be working with us In February, Tom, if you hand this project to Ken, that doesn't mean we don't talk to you until May. These workshops and stuff,
Sure.
we're hand in hand because it's to all of our benefits that we're aiming this all in the right direction and we understand each other. But it's up to us and especially the engineering staff to pull the numbers together to give you those options so you can make informed decisions.
I'm going to just ask one more, and then I'll step off and let the rest of the board members, if they have any comments or questions. Obviously, we've gone through a similar process at the town for this. It was before my time, but it ended up bonding $9 million, getting a WIA grant for 25%. And I know it's not the term you want to use anymore, Art, but we went off and did phase one, the secondary clarifiers, whatever.
That's what it was, yep.
I beg your pardon?
And that's exactly what it was, phase one.
Okay. I'm familiar, I think, with another government entity that has somewhat gone through this process, but then has now just stopped and kind of in a holding pattern of whether they're going to accept the WIA grant and the terms and all that. And it looks as though that kind of delay could go on for 2 years. And I guess what I'm asking is, for the board to consider authorizing the study and the monies of $25,000, by no means is that authorizing that we have figured out how to bond and grant and whatever, what could be $10+ million. And as you go through this timeline, where does the town board basically in this timeline say, we're going for your for the money, the grants, all the stuff? Where is that? Because obviously it's before the construction starts in April 2022. I got to believe it's before the bidding and the award in March. So is it somewhere in that August 21 to January 22nd, or do you not do final design before?
Yeah, so again, the intent would be to give the board a final report by July. That August date has just been the traditional date that EFC says, all right, we need your report by here. So again, our thought here is we're finished by July, and then similar to your phase one, any project like this has to go through the environmental review, the seeker. And then once you do the seeker on it, that brings you to the point where you can adopt the bond resolution. So that typically would happen in the 2 months, July, August.
And I apologize if I'm not asking the question the right way. Can you apply for these grants and all that to see what you get before the town board basically then commits to bonding and all that? Or is it something where the town board has to commit to the money before you before you submit for grants?
Right. In today's funding world, with a WIA grant, yes, you have to show your commitment, which includes your seeker and adopting your bond resolution.
Where does that happen in this timeline?
Again, it would be
The good thing about seeker is it has to happen, it happens before all the final design. It actually has to be an action you must take very early on. Right when the PER is being developed, at the end you can actually run the environmental review process. I think, and I'm going to jump in, and I hope I'm not jumping in here improperly. Let's just say the hypothetical $10 million that you threw. Let's just say that's the project. The question that the town will have later in the summer or near beginning of fall is, do you go in a wait and see process to see what all the grant potential would be, or do you, on a parallel basis, initiate the design work to get a project ready for bid while you're going and you're trying to anticipate what the grants are? Until the bidding award of March of 2022, other than some additional design work, that's when the big decision is made of awarding the big contracts to the contractors. And by that time, you should clearly know
what your grant potential is and what the local share is. So I think the way I look at it is, because I was on your side of the aisle a lot more than I've been on this side, I think we see this to keep the project moving, because one of the things that we see now is having shovel-ready projects ready means they have to be designed and ready to go. Because one of the other funding sources is obviously there's some chat at the federal level of something to stimulate some infrastructure. But if you're not ready, you can't play in that game. So the concept here, and Art, I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth when I say this, is the whole thought is to get this project positioned by getting this PER done and then commencing some actual design so it truly is a shovel-ready job. And then you can make the big decision, do you release bids and do you award construction?
Well,
Fair?
one more thing to add to that too is, this project differs from phase one because you're actually looking at a project that could possibly build a grant, okay? The numbers that were presented by Art and Rick looked at your immediate payback, that if you do these improvements on the solids handling side, number one, you're reducing your tipping fees, which could be $500,000 a year, which could pay for your debt or be applied toward your debt service. Number two, that if you do in fact put in and reinstate your leachate and your septage receiving, that's revenue coming in that could also be applied. So that there is a difference that will be born out of the plan of finance based on what we put together to ultimately come at, to show you
Sure.
what the net annual debt service would be, and then any supplemental grants that you would need beyond what you're going to achieve in annual savings on O&M side.
And I think what Ken is chatting about, or is mentioning now, is really part of the parallel portion of what's being generated by this PER, is there is a pro forma associated with this. There are, number one, a better operating digester is going to reduce the amount of solids you have. A better operating dewatering device is going to reduce the amount of solids you have. If you go to a sludge dryer, you dramatically reduce the solids you have. If you are able to reinstate septage or whatever, you have a different revenue stream coming in. There's a lot of expense that's ahead of the town, but on this project, I think the beauty is it has some revenue potential to offset the bad things associated with a capital project. But we don't know, we don't have that answer tonight. That answer will be coming when that PER draft and the final comes out during the summer.
I'm all set.
Rick?
Mr. Canali?
Just to piggyback off the shovel ready, I was actually out of the Mount Babes, or whatever you want to say. I was at a conference in Albany about 3 years ago, and it was a state funding agency that stated they want to give the money to the people that are shovel ready and that utilize that money. Don't sit on projects that they're not ready for because it makes them look bad. And the ones that use it and put it to use and upgrade their plants, they're willing to give more to. So if you're shovel ready, you have those projects designed, you got money in the game, skin in the game, they're willing to give that money. So that was right out of their mouth.
I'm going to piggyback off of that, and that's something I learned from Pete in this project, Pete and Ken, is once we were shovel ready with phase one, then it opened up the door for that $3 million grant. And I sat in those meetings when they said this, yeah, we want to give that money away. We want to give it to people who can use it, who are ready to use it.
And if I could just jump on that as well, a project that Rick in his past life worked on with us received $3.5 million WIA and $1 million NYSERDA. Just today, or just yesterday, with the grant that Ken is talking about that's now opening up, it appears that the balance of the project, since it hasn't been built, is now eligible for additional money. The state agencies have to get the money out, so there's a $15 million project that's halfway done. It looks like that $7 million balance that the town has to pay the contractors is now grant eligible, and they're going into the CFA portal. They don't know it yet, but they'll be going into the CFA portal and applying, because there's $17 million became available last week. It became available and there's a project ready. B&L has that project in their back pocket. We can apply for our client and, cross our fingers. We hope to be giving good news to that client. But the project's ready. It's really the key.
Yeah, and I said on that call the other day as well with the green energy, and my takeaway was the same. They're including wastewater. They want to give the money away. They want to see some improvements. It's out there for the taking.
Bill?
I worked on these projects before. You got to put up money up front and hope that you get money on the backside. Just how it works.
And Bill, on that, and what's great about this is, and you brought it up at the last time, is that phase one was really just infrastructure upgrades. There was no, what we want to call an ROI. This project has, what you emphasized, it has cost savings, revenue generation. So this project has pieces of it that will help pay for it too. So.
Barry?
Well, we definitely have a need. And I think moving forward, that need should include revenue development. I mean, we have the need to, where we actually, we need to do this. We need to go to phase 2. We know that. What we don't have already assigned is revenue development, the drying, the septage, receiving. I think that should all be part of it. That's just my thought.
Agree.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add. I feel the same way that Barry does.
No,
I
we
mean,
should learn.
when you look at the potential savings and the potential revenue of a project like this, the cost for this study pales in comparison.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like we said, when you started out, you said last thing we want to see is one more study. We have to be prepared to commit to this by doing this study as well. We don't need to pay for a study and have it sit on the shelf.
John?
I don't think we have any other option but to have the study done, because the facility itself is in dire need of this. And the interesting and exciting aspect that Rick and Art have brought forward is the potential revenue generation. We know we have a significant annual increase in our hauling. We have to do something to bring that down.
Yeah.
We know that landfills will be closing in a very few years. So you want to always look 20 years ahead. So the cost savings and revenue generating has absolutely got to be integral with what we're looking at. So I'm on the same page, absolutely.
And Charlie, I would just ask this to sum it up. We committed last year to trying to get the agendas for formal board meetings and workshops into the official paper, the Webster Herald, 8 days before the actual meeting. Well, the Wednesday, January 13th edition of the Webster Herald is out, and it's got the Thursday, January 21st formal board meeting agenda topics. I don't think there's anything that precludes us from adding a resolution to vote on the money. I didn't think so.
Nope.
We can put it on, we'd be giving notice.
Yeah.
Or whatever, okay.
Yeah.
Well then, wow, I don't have anything else.
Does Art realize the money's coming out?
Okay, so that said, our next step, we provided a scope. We need the contractual language to go with that. And we've been using what's called the EJ CDC contract, which is something we could send through Art for Charlie to take a look at. We can get
Yeah, the
that
sooner
out.
the better, because I think,
Yeah.
does that tie into the resolution verbiage or language for next Thursday?
Yep.
Okay. And Hey, John, I said by 6:30 we'd be done, but I also said we can't shortchange this, because
I don't remember the short change part.
I said we can't I mean, Ken, you came in from Syracuse for this.
I need
So,
my ROI out of this meeting, you know.
Don't you get mileage?
Company vehicle perspective.
No, all great information, I think, tonight. Thank you
Yeah.
very much,
No, this
gentlemen.
is-
No, thank you for the opportunity. It's
Yeah.
good to be back in front of you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Yep, thank you.
And unless anybody else has anything, that concludes our workshop for the night.